Jane, you've just heard what the Housing Minister had to say. What's your reaction to it?
Well, I think, first of all, I welcomed his acknowledgement that we need more houses in Scotland. I think I have to say that Scotland's population deserves better than blaming it all on Westminster. I don't think that's fair or right. The housing, we're in a housing crisis. It's been building up since 2008. You know, we've got 100,000 deficit in houses. We've got a 41% drop in housing starts. You know, all of the data that we're creating, none of it is telling us that we're dealing with a problem, and it's a devolved issue as well.
Why is that, do you think?
Look, housing's very complex. It's got a lot of diverse stakeholders. It's easy to blame government, but whatever solution it is, it has to be across private and public sector. We need to talk all tenure because it's all interlinked. But I think at the basic, if we all think about housing as a human right, we start with that premise, and then we look at where the solutions lie in terms of what are the actual barriers, and planning is obviously a barrier. Housing policy is not a priority in the Scottish Government. It wasn't in the programme for government. It sits over here, and it needs to be cross-directorate because our national outcomes in Scotland, housing impacts every one of them, educational attainment, you know, well-being, everything. And I think that if we can look at it with a systemic approach to it, and then we can break down the barriers, but at the moment it's just in silos and nobody's finding the solutions. And I think,
what sort of solutions would you be thinking of? Give us an idea of what.
I think they've got to be short term. I think because it's immediate, you know, I think you mentioned in your report, 3 local authorities now announcing housing emergencies. We are in a crisis. We're not delivering the houses that the Scottish population needs, and that's private, affordable and sociable. I think that if it was a solution, and I've discussed this with government, I think planning needs to have an immediate solution. It needs resource. They've cut that in the draft Scottish budget as well. I think if they can get some resource into the planning system and exemptions on those planning applications that are going to delay large numbers of houses being built in rural and urban conurbations, that's one solution. But I think they need to look at data. They need to look at the policies that they're creating. It's a heavily regulated industry sector, and if they can look at how those policies are creating some of the unintended consequences, and those are normally reducing housing supply, and just acknowledge that we're in a very difficult economic arena at the moment as well, and this is a fragile industry. We saw that with Stuart Milne. The small and medium builders really struggling. Just
very briefly and finally, if there have been calls for a national emergency plan, we've heard that 3 local authorities have declared emergencies. Would a national emergency plan work? How would it work? Briefly, I know it's a complex question.
Well, I don't want to talk about bureaucracy at this stage, but it would absolutely depend in terms of how honest that we were being about what the problem is. And I think that's half the problem. It's always political. There will be some defensiveness. If we can just be honest about what the problem is, what the barriers are, the solutions are there, but it needs collaboration across industry and government, and it needs government to use data and evidence better.
Jane Wood, thanks for joining us in Scotland tonight.